Story 1. When I noticed I was happier when they were not around, I left the moment I realized loneliness with peace was better than company with chaos. Story 2. Caught him cheating 2 weeks before the wedding, and he tried the "you'll never find someone else who is willing to put up with you" line. He said, "You'll die alone and get eaten by your cats." I walked away right then. Story 3. I knew he was toxic the night he read my messages while I was asleep and then cried until 5 a.m., accusing me of cheating. I walked away when I realized I was apologizing for things I never even did. Story 4. Often, people notice toxicity when they start losing confidence or feel like they are walking on eggshells. Leaving typically follows after they rebuild enough self-worth to choose better for themselves. Story 5. Gradually, there is more passive and active-aggressive behavior. She is going her own way while using our relationship for financial gain. She uses the silent treatment instead of discussing problems. I walked away too late. Story 6. When I constantly justified their behavior but felt guilty at the same time, I realized that this was not love but emotional exhaustion. It was scary to leave, but staying was even scarier. Story 7. I noticed he was toxic when I realized I was isolated from my family and friends. I was the only breadwinner, and he brought nothing to the table except complaints about how I didn't pay him enough attention or affection because I worked day and night to support a leech and sad excuse of a man. He would choke me to silence me when I expressed that calling me a child contradicted the list of adult responsibilities he left me to handle because he did nothing to help. Not to mention, I had surgery on my spine and neck after a car accident the same year I met him. He very well could have paralyzed me, and he knew that. Story 8. I had been battling depression for years, and our marriage had been difficult for even longer than that. I also struggled with fatigue and was drinking more than I probably should. I walked away after our marriage counselor made an offhand remark that some couples are just better off separating. This was an epiphany for me, and on the drive home I made up my mind to leave. A few weeks later I was gone. Immediately my depression was gone. I have not taken antidepressants in well over a decade now. My fatigue became much more manageable and has remained so ever since. I do not really drink anymore. It is not that I made an effort to stop drinking, I just do not feel the need. Every aspect of my life improved, and it was only after I left that I realized how toxic she really was and still is. Story 9. Within weeks of starting college, he was threatening suicide. Then he purposely took a year off work to rack up debt in revenge. Once he had to get a job, he cheated on me and tried to kick me out of the apartment. He also made a drunken fool of himself at one of my college parties. The man was an absolute wreck, but I kept hoping he would pull himself together eventually. I slowly woke up until his attempt to kick me out finally triggered the switch from "I want to protect this person" to "this person is a danger to my health and safety." Story 10. There was a constant need for attention and validation, and if I was not there for her immediately, she would manipulate me and continually demean me. Took me years to finally end things. Story 11. I knew she was toxic, but I thought she had redeemable qualities. After I caught her cheating, she ended up blaming me. Then I realized, finally. Story 12. When I realized that no matter how much I loved him, or how much he loved me, the addiction would always win in the end. It took 3 heartbreaking attempts before I finally understood that I needed to save the rest of my own life. Story 13. He pushed my sexual boundaries and then got upset with me when I became scared. He made it about his rejection and said he did not know how we could move past it. Then he looked me in the face and said he could not be kind to me when he was hurt. During an hours-long conversation, he said we needed to reduce our relationship to the bare minimum while he tried to forgive me. He spoke to me with enough contempt to make me afraid of what would happen in the future. I ended it the next day. Story 14. I realized a year after we broke up that she said I was not making an effort in the relationship and always chose my friends over her, despite me driving 4 hours round trip multiple times a week to see her. Bullet dodged. Sort of. Story 15. The first time, they made me question my own memory. Despite being wrong, they blamed me and insisted they were right. If something goes missing, they blame me. Story 16. This is a good one. One day I was driving and thought, If I just veer the wheel right now and kill myself, I won't be blamed for being selfish and killing myself, and I will not have to deal with him anymore. I'll be free. No one would ever know. It would be an accident, and I wouldn't be seen as a selfish person who left him. He was manipulative and gaslighting. He sucked all the life out of me, an absolute emotional vampire. He made sure to tell me every day how I was better in life than him, how he was so miserable, how I was the only good thing in his life, the only thing worth living for. All this to ensure that I would not leave him because he knew my heart would not let me live with being the selfish person who left her fiancé, knowing that he had no money, no car, no house, no qualities, no family relationships, no happiness, no academic success, while I had everything. His words, not mine. When you start thinking of a way to leave this world so your partner will not see you as selfish, even though your partner is the whole reason you want to leave, that is when you understand he is toxic. Story 17. For me, it clicked when I realized I was constantly anxious around them, walking on eggshells to avoid arguments. Walking away was not easy, but I finally set a hard boundary and reminded myself that my mental health mattered more than maintaining the relationship. Story 18. When he turned every story and action into a competition, I realized I was never allowed to win. Story 19. When I noticed I was always drained around them, that was when I knew it was time to leave. Story 20. When I noticed I was constantly drained instead of happy, I knew it was time to leave. Story 21. Interestingly, when I was quite young, I developed my approach to relationships. I am a 49-year-old man now. It was not toxicity as such, just vastly different outlooks. In my late teens, my girlfriend at the time would always find a way to start an argument. I have never wanted to fight with anyone. I asked her honestly why she did it. She said that her parents would always fight, so she saw that as how love was expressed. Since ending that relationship, I have always remained conscious of how people view conflict in relationships. It has stood me in good stead. Story 22. When I realized I was apologizing for things I did not even do just to avoid another fight, that is when it hit me. Love should not feel like walking on broken glass. Story 23. I realized very quickly but did not listen. I dated him for 2.5 more years. I almost left 2 months in. I was a fool. It was when he refused to video chat with me ever. I knew he was real and what he really looked like, and that he was overweight, but he never wanted to video chat with me and would literally threaten to end his life. I should have let him. Then he could not have raped me or choked me. Story 24. When they started acting like a political rally and kept going off about false information every time I caught them in a lie, I finally walked away when I realized my relationship was more toxic than a political debate. Story 25. She lied about an interaction with a family member. I realized she had been doing the same to me for years. Some trivial thing she thought would make her look bad. Once I understood that she would do this to me, it became clear that she had been throwing the kids under the bus to me for years over matters that did not even matter. Things got worse, and eventually, I asked her to leave. Story 26. When she started isolating me from friends, I talked it out with her and gave up on us. She did not want to change despite our talks and kept getting possessive and clingy. Story 27. I found out he was toxic when I licked his elbow as a prank and started hallucinating. I walked away slowly and stumbled a lot. Story 28. Refusing to communicate about problems and starting to see me as competition rather than celebrating my accomplishments. We work in the same industry at different levels. She wanted me to get a service industry job, which would have taken time away from working towards my actual goals. When I said I was using the degree I spent my life working for, she snarkily asked, "And how is that working out for you?" The answer is actually pretty well, so I did not know what she wanted me to say. I should have left then, but sadly overlooked that red flag like many others because I still wanted to try to make things work. She ended up ending the relationship later on. Story 29. I always knew she was toxic, but finding another man deeply involved with her pushed me over the edge. Story 30. It is not always easy to recognize, as there are always differences in character formation. However, I once had a partner who tried to stifle me in 2 ways. On one hand, he tried to cut off my contact with family and friends. On the other hand, he could be incredibly charming and make me feel that I didn't need anyone but him. I particularly recognized this toxic behavior when I visited a friend for 3 days on vacation, alone and 400 kilometers away. There, he could no longer maintain his behavioral mask, and I decided to pack my bag resolutely and not look back. That was when I became aware of true liberation. Story 31. I was her personal punching bag. I would brace myself whenever things did not go her way. It did not matter whether it was my fault or someone else's. I would get screamed at, threatened, and belittled. If I dared to say anything, I would get the silent treatment or worse, be physically hurt. It took me 5 years to leave because otherwise she was sweet and gentle, and I refused to believe I was in an abusive relationship. It was a valuable lesson, but I am still scarred for life. Story 32. I told him I was going to China for 2 weeks to attend my grandfather's funeral and to help my family take care of my grandmother who was in the intensive care unit. His reaction was, word for word, "You're going to leave me all alone for 2 weeks?" He also messaged me, "At least you're having more fun than I am." After I had spent most of the day talking to doctors and debating with my family about whether or not to take her off life support, I broke up with him the day I got back. Story 33. I started going to college, and for some reason I was not allowed to drive myself, so he gave me rides. It ensured I could not stick around and make friends, I guess. Suddenly, it was a red flag. Story 34. Just because he is good for your whole, does not mean he is good for your soul. Story 35. When I felt peace was when they were not around. Do not get me wrong, I enjoyed being with him, but every time I was with him, he would often argue. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, but I am sure he felt the same way toward me too. I did not leave. He did. Story 36. When I realized I was apologizing for things that were not my fault, just to avoid another 3-hour discussion about why my breathing too loudly was disrespectful, I left faster than a Windows Vista update. Story 37. When I felt that I had to force myself to talk with them about anything or be near them at all, I realized love should invigorate and encourage, not exhaust. Story 38. She started lying about small things that did not make any difference to friends and about her children. I knew the truth and it seemed unnecessary. Story 39. For many years, I tried to cope with the toxicity, always making excuses for his behavior. At some point, I realized that the common denominator was him, and I was done with him. It was terrible for my friends, family, and his colleagues, and the embarrassment and guilt by association were too much to carry. It is over when you cannot be bothered to argue anymore, and every small thing feels huge in your head. Story 40. When I found out they were letting friends speak badly about me and didn't do anything about it, just sat and listened, it was the final straw after many instances. You disrespect me to my face and I take it, but when you allow others to do the same, that's it. Story 41. I had to go on an extended work trip for about 2 months. My girlfriend did not want me to go and was seriously guilt-tripping me about it. I almost did not go, but I did. My supervisor at the away office recognized something in me. She told me that she thought I would benefit from seeing a therapist, which was fully paid for by my employer. I did, and long story short, after 2 sessions, I realized how incredibly bad my relationship at home was and made the work trip permanent. Story 42. When he told me that he told everyone at school that I was his girlfriend during our sophomore year, long after we broke up. I was about to get back with him days after graduation, but when he told me that, I just couldn't get past it. Story 43. When she gave her 2-year-old son a bath in my master bathroom, then left his soiled diaper on the bathroom floor for me to smell the next morning after I got home from my night shift job, and then tried to make me out to be the bad guy for being annoyed when I found it. That's when it clicked. She genuinely believed that everything is someone else's fault and nothing she does is wrong. Story 44. I had a stressful dream that my ex and my childhood abuser were the same person trying to chase me. I couldn't look at my ex the same way after that. Our bodies really do try to communicate with us. Story 45. When I realized I did not have to act a certain way to impress them. Story 46. I am far from being the type to suffer fools, so I have never gotten further than a few dates with someone toxic. One that stands out to me is a man with whom I had a 1-hour video call after 2 dates and a lot of talking. During the video call, he complained that I had been doing other things, such as trying on clothes to see if they still fit me. He felt it was unfair that I had not given him my full attention while he expected my full attention. I ended it right there. Story 47. Eating ice cream from the corner shop on a hot summer afternoon with my friends. Story 48. When he attacked me verbally for petty, unpleasant reasons as we broke up. I remembered that we were born almost at the same time, 6 minutes apart. There had been an immediate affinity at first. Story 49. She received a text message on my phone that Jane Doe had given birth. She immediately asked me if I was the father. Jane is my niece. They have met. It was a short relationship. Story 50. He wouldn't start conversations with me about the things that were bothering him. He wanted me to go fishing. He once went fishing until I stumbled across the problem. I asked him how his day went. He said fine. Later, he went off on me because his childhood friend was getting a divorce. It was very traumatizing for him because his parents divorced when he was a child. I sat there while he berated me, wondering how he expected me to figure this out since he had never once talked to me about this friend, that the friend was married or that the friend was having marital issues. There was also what I realized was financial abuse throughout the relationship. He would always unburden how unhappy he was with the relationship but do nothing to fix it. One day he said we should end things, likely thinking I would fight to stay. It was an easy out. I walked away. I should have left years earlier. He was charming around other people. In private, a lot of issues surfaced. I kept thinking it would get better. Didn't. Story 51. The beginning of the end was when we took her to the airport. We were a long-distance couple, and she was on vacation with me and my parents in Washington, D.C. She was leaving a day early, so we went to the airport, but there was no record of her flight. After 10 minutes of crying and talking with the airline, the employee asked, "Is your ticket for the other airport?" I then realized that my ex never showed me her ticket and had guessed the airport. She had no idea there was more than one. Immediately, I realized that many other times things went wrong for her. It was because she did not do the bare minimum effort and expected someone else to figure things out for her. We broke up shortly after. After we broke up, she revealed she had cheated on me with her coworker a few times, so I made the right call. Story 52. He went to a game night at a friend's house. I did not like the friend, so I was not invited. The friend brought a single girl to be my boyfriend's partner. At that moment, I learned I could not trust anything he had ever told me. After a huge fight and him saying it was no big deal, I was done. I wonder how often there were other girls. We fought a lot, which was most of our toxic behavior. Story 53. When she stabbed me, I had ignored plenty of other signs, but that was the final wake-up call. Story 54. After she sent me borderline not safe for work pictures and then told her mother I did it. Story 55. When he walked away from me in the middle of joyfully telling him a story, I tentatively called out, "Hello?" Not believing he had just done that. His response from the other room was, "I don't have to pay attention to you 100% of the time." Story 56. When she hit me to provoke me into hitting her back, I ended the relationship while on a family vacation almost a year later. I had grown tired of constantly feeling like I was walking on eggshells and having good days ruined because she was upset about something random and not really important. Story 57. I had a very toxic friend in 7th grade. I don't want to call people out, so I'll just call him Joe. Joe was my friend back then, and he was more like a Karen than just toxic. In 6th period, he would not stop dropping curse words about my other friends and saying how they kicked his ass. I know this wasn't true because my other friends went to school in another state. Anyway, Joe would not be quiet. He kept wanting to sit next to me, and if he didn't, or if another kid didn't want to move, he would go haywire and beat up the kid that refused to move. I was afraid that if I told him I didn't want to be friends with him anymore, he would do what he did to the other kids to me. He kept being disrespectful to the teachers, and I took summer school because of him blaming things on me and causing my grades in all my classes to go down. When it was finally summer, I told my parents what happened, and they were furious. They never let me back to that school until high school, and by that time he had moved away. I think he moved to Arizona or somewhere else. Story 58. I realized when she refused to put as much effort into improving herself as I was. Story 59. Punched holes over my head, cheated on him around the world as a flight attendant, and he came home to my things gone. Story 60. When I found out he was cheating, lying, and betraying D-Max, I did not know what to think. But what about the debts to the point of sinking with debts? Then I realized he never even supported us financially with our kids. I was the only one supporting after 15 years. I just realized it's a good thing it happened. I do not know where all his money from debts went. May he rest in peace. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.